Welcome to the MOOC course on Buddhist philosophy. Our module today is on Buddhist feminism. The learning objective of this module is to understand the various ways in which Buddhist women throughout history have struggled to carve out a space for themselves as equally capable practitioners of the tradition. In many Asian societies, feminism is often dismissed as an idea that has been imported from the West and which has no relevance in the local culture. This view is held by both women and men, as they cannot relate to the feminist frameworks which are based on very generalized understanding of women's experiences. Feminist writers in these last few decades have emphasized that if their work is to result in the empowerment of women and in social action, it must be sensitive to race, to ethnicity, religious and cultural context, social class, and so on. Feminism in the Buddhist context calls for sensitivity to the very same issues, as well as to the tradition whose roots run deep in the social fabric. In modern times, the Buddhist monastic community has embraced several changes, especially those that were brought in by technology. But the role of women in monastic systems has not kept pace with these developments. In the recent decades, however, there have been some inspiring movements as Buddhist women have quietly begun to challenge the traditional roles assigned to them. They have carved out spaces for engaged action in patriarchal societies in very powerful ways. And the primary issue that Buddhist feminists have to address is the struggle for rights and access to the same kind of training and religious cultivation as men, to the same kind of opportunity and support from society as well as governments, so that they too can achieve their true potential on the spiritual path. This was possible in the time of the Buddha. Then why can't it be possible now? In this module on Buddhist feminism, we will focus on the struggle of modern women in Buddhist societies who have worked within cultural constraints, within traditions that have been handed down through male monastics, to frame compelling arguments for equity in the system, beginning with the issue of full ordination itself. We will then study the contribution of a Theravada nun in Thailand, Bhikkhuni Dhammananda. Finally, we will also examine the role of Shakyaditha, an association of Buddhist women that has worked consistently for collective action and more effective advocacy. First though, let us consider the historical context. Women were first ordained in the Buddhist Sangha as a result of the persistent requests from Mahaprajapati Gautami, the Buddha's foster mother. After the Buddha had denied them ordination in Kapilavastu, she did not give up. She had marched to Vaishali with a group of like-minded women to repeat their request. Finally, the Buddha gave in when Ananda pleaded on their behalf, but he also assigned 8 special rules known as the Garudhammas, which they had to observe over and above the other rules of monastic discipline. The Garudhammas clearly mark the women renunciants as being subordinate to their male counterparts, but they are justified within the tradition with the metaphor of a dike. A dike is a wall or an embankment which protects from flooding from the sea. In a similar manner, these rules were thought to create a protective environment in which the women could focus on spiritual progress. However, Modern nuns have questioned whether such rules could really have been framed by the Buddha himself. Perhaps they were added later by monks who were eager to ensure their superior position vis-a-vis the nuns. The Vinaya Pitaka, which contains the rules of monastic discipline, has 227 rules for men and 311 for women. These rules were framed by the Buddha on occasions when the behavior of either the monks or the nuns was perceived to be against the principal tenets of the Dhamma and therefore likely to hamper the cultivation of spiritual practice. The Mahaparinibbana Sutta of the Pali tradition does record the Buddha's instructions that minor rules of the Vinaya were not so important. They could be done away with over time. But as Ananda did not seek clarification on which exactly these minor rules were, tradition chose to make the observance of all rules mandatory. The ordination process itself is quite discriminatory, as women are required to undergo a 2-year period of probation after being ordained as novices before they qualify for full ordination. This practice does not apply to monks. While these facts clearly depict an environment that lacked gender equality, the Pali texts also record numerous examples of the remarkable spiritual attainments of nuns from the ancient Buddhist world. These women clearly had agency and had forged their way through the limitations that the extra rules or the social conditions may have placed on them. They had relentlessly pursued the ideal of monastic life, and their experiences are recorded in a text called the Theri Gatha or Verses of the Nuns, which forms a part of the Khuddaka Nikaya of the Pali Tipitaka. This is the first ever collection of poems written by women anywhere in the world, and these verses attest to the enlightenment experiences of these early nuns in the Buddhist Sangha. The directness of their expression draws out the sheer grit with which these women pursued the highest goal. Here is an excerpt from Theri Soma's composition, where Mara, the evil one, says to her, "It is hard to get to the place that sages want to reach. It is not possible for a woman, especially not one with only 2 fingers worth of wisdom." Here, Mara is referring to the fact that women check whether rice is cooked by squeezing the grain between 2 fingers, and he equates their wisdom to being just that much. Soma gives a spirited reply. What does being a woman have to do with it? What counts is that the heart is settled and that one sees what truly is. The Sutta Pitaka, which is a collection of the discourses of the Buddha, also preserves remarks by the Buddha praising the nuns for their understanding of the Dhamma. The Chula Vedalla Sutta records a discussion between Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna, who was an Arhat, and the layman Vishakha, who had attained to the stage of non-returner and who, according to the commentary, is her former husband. He asks her a series of questions about self-identification and the path, the nature of its development and the attainment of Nibbana. At the end of the sutta, Vishakha goes to the Buddha and repeats their discussion. The Buddha praises Dhammadinna as a woman of great wisdom and says that he too would have given the exact same answers if those questions had been posed to him. The descriptions of the attainments of these early nuns are very inspiring, and their poems seem to speak across the centuries to modern Buddhist women, strengthening their resolve to carve a better place for themselves in the religious world.